Sarah Martinez had always been different from other women her age. While her friends spent their evenings at coffee shops or shopping malls, she was completing her final training exercises as one of the Navy's most elite warriors. The 28-year-old had spent the last 8 years proving herself in a world dominated by men, earning her place among the SEALs through sheer determination and skill that left even her toughest instructors speechless. The small town of Millfield rarely saw excitement beyond the occasional high school football game, but that Tuesday evening in October would change everything. Sarah had returned home to visit her elderly parents after completing a classified mission overseas. She wore simple civilian clothes, jeans, a plain sweater, and sneakers, nothing that would hint at her extraordinary background. Her mother had insisted on cooking her favorite dinner, and Sarah found herself relaxing for the first time in months. The local convenience store sat at the corner of Main Street and Oak Avenue, a place where everyone knew everyone else's name. Sarah stopped by around 9 in the evening to pick up some ice cream for dessert. The teenage cashier, Tommy, recognized her immediately and started chatting about how proud the whole town was of her service. Sarah smiled politely, but kept the conversation brief, as she always did when people asked about her work. 3 men had been watching the store for over an hour. Jake Morrison, the leader of this small-time criminal group, had been recently released from prison after serving 5 years for armed robbery. His 2 companions, Rick and Danny, were local troublemakers who had graduated from petty theft to more serious crimes. They had chosen this particular store because they believed it would be an easy target. A sleepy town, minimal security, and usually just one person working the late shift. Morrison had done his research poorly. He assumed the store would have a decent amount of cash from the day's business, and he figured the young cashier would be too scared to resist. What he didn't count on was having a customer in the store during their planned robbery, especially not someone like Sarah Martinez. The 3 men entered the store with Morrison in the lead, his face partially covered by a hood. Rick positioned himself near the door to watch for anyone approaching, while Danny moved toward the back of the store. Sarah was standing in the frozen food section, comparing ice cream flavors when she heard Morrison's voice rise aggressively. "Open that register right now, kid, and nobody gets hurt," Morrison shouted, pulling out a cheap pistol that he waved toward Tommy behind the counter. The teenager's face went pale as he fumbled with the cash register, his hands shaking so badly he could barely press the buttons. Sarah's training kicked in immediately. Years of combat experience had taught her to assess situations within seconds. She counted 3 perpetrators, noted their positions, and evaluated their weapons. Morrison appeared to be the only one armed, though she couldn't be completely certain about the others. The store's layout worked in her favor. Several aisles provided cover, and she had a clear view of the main threat. Rather than immediately intervening, Sarah decided to observe and gather more information. She crouched down behind a display of potato chips, using her phone to quietly call 911. However, she knew that in a town like Millfield, police response time could be anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. Tommy might not have that long, especially if these criminals panicked. Morrison grew increasingly agitated as Tommy struggled with the register. "What's taking so long?" he screamed. "You think I'm playing games here?" He moved closer to the counter, pressing the gun against the glass barrier that separated him from the cashier. "Please, I'm trying," Tommy stammered. "The register is old and sometimes it sticks. Just give me another second." Rick, who was supposed to be watching the door, had become distracted by the candy display near the entrance. He grabbed several chocolate bars and stuffed them in his pockets, apparently thinking this was an opportune time for some free snacks. Danny had wandered toward the back coolers and was helping himself to beer, clearly not taking his role as lookout very seriously. Sarah realized these weren't professional criminals. Their lack of organization and discipline suggested they were amateurs, which could make them either easier to handle or more unpredictable. Amateur criminals often made poor decisions under pressure, and that could put Tommy in even greater danger. The situation escalated quickly when Tommy finally got the register open. Morrison saw there was less money than he had expected, maybe $300 in bills and change. His anger flared, and he blamed Tommy for somehow hiding money from him. "This is all you got?" Morrison shouted. "You're lying to me, kid. Where's the rest of it?" He raised his gun higher, pointing it directly at Tommy's head. "Tell me where you keep the safe, or I'll blow your brains out right here." Tommy was now crying openly. "There's no safe," he pleaded. "This is everything. We deposit most of the money every few hours. Please, I'm telling the truth." Sarah knew she had to act. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, and Morrison was clearly unstable. She had two choices: wait for police who might not arrive in time, or use her training to neutralize the threat herself. The decision was easy. Moving silently through the aisles, Sarah positioned herself where she could see Morrison clearly while remaining hidden from Rick and Danny. She studied Morrison's stance and grip on the weapon. His form was terrible. He held the gun awkwardly, suggesting he wasn't experienced with firearms. This gave her confidence that she could disarm him quickly if she got close enough. Sarah also noticed that Morrison kept glancing around nervously, indicating he was aware that staying too long increased his risk of getting caught. This time, pressure might work to her advantage if she could create enough confusion to throw off his concentration. The moment that changed everything came when Morrison decided he wasn't leaving empty-handed. Frustrated by the small amount of cash, he grabbed Tommy by the shirt and dragged him out from behind the counter. "You're coming with us," Morrison announced. "We'll find that safe you're hiding, even if I have to tear this whole place apart." Sarah knew that if Tommy left the store with these criminals, his chances of survival dropped dramatically. Kidnapping victims rarely survived encounters with desperate criminals, especially when those criminals realized they weren't going to get what they wanted. She made her move. Sarah emerged from behind the display with the calm confidence that only comes from years of elite military training. She walked casually toward the counter, her hands visible and non-threatening, as if she were just another concerned customer who wanted to help resolve the situation peacefully. "Hey, there's no need for anyone to get hurt here," she said in a steady voice, addressing Morrison directly. "Why don't you just take the money and leave? Nobody has to know what anyone looks like." Morrison spun around, surprised to discover there had been another person in the store. His grip on Tommy tightened as he pointed the gun in Sarah's direction. "Where did you come from?" he demanded. "Get back or I'll shoot both of you." Rick finally looked up from the candy he was stealing and noticed the confrontation developing. "Jake, who is this lady?" he called out, moving closer to the action but still maintaining his distance from any real danger. Danny, who had been loading beer into a backpack he found somewhere in the store, also became aware that their simple robbery was becoming complicated. "Maybe we should just go," he suggested nervously. "We got some cash and free stuff. Let's not make this worse." Morrison was torn between cutting his losses and maintaining control of the situation. The presence of a witness changed everything, but he also didn't want to appear weak in front of his associates. His criminal pride was getting in the way of good judgment. "Nobody leaves until I say so," Morrison declared, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Lady, get over here next to the kid. Both of you are going to help me find where they really keep the money." Sarah continued approaching slowly, her hands still visible. "Look, I understand you need money, but this isn't the way to get it. The police are probably already on their way. If you leave now, you can avoid catching serious charges." What Morrison didn't realize was that every step Sarah took brought her closer to striking distance. She was measuring the distance between them, calculating angles and preparing for multiple scenarios. Her apparent cooperation was actually reconnaissance. "I don't need advice from some small-town soccer mom," Morrison sneered. "Just do what I tell you, and maybe nobody gets shot tonight." The comment about being a soccer mom almost made Sarah smile. If Morrison only knew who he was really dealing with, He might have reconsidered his entire life of crime. But Sarah kept her expression neutral and continued playing the role of a concerned citizen. "You're right," she said, taking another step forward. "I'm just worried about the boy. He's really young, and I can see he's scared. Maybe I could take his place? I'm probably worth more as a hostage anyway." Morrison considered this offer. An adult hostage might indeed be more valuable than a teenager, especially if negotiations with police became necessary. But something about Sarah's demeanor made him suspicious. She seemed too calm for someone facing an armed robber. "Stop right there," Morrison ordered, raising his gun to point directly at Sarah's chest. "I don't trust you. Something's not right about you." This was the moment Sarah had been waiting for. Morrison had made a tactical error by focusing entirely on her while loosening his grip on Tommy. In that split second of distraction, she struck with the precision and speed that had made her one of the military's most effective operators. Sarah's movement was so fast that Rick and Danny didn't even realize what happened until it was over. She stepped forward and to the side simultaneously, avoiding the gun's line of fire while grabbing Morrison's wrist. Using leverage and momentum, she twisted his arm in a way that forced him to drop the weapon while sending him crashing into a display of snack foods. Tommy scrambled away from the confrontation and ran toward the store's back office, where Sarah had instructed him to go with a quick hand signal during the action. She had learned to communicate silently with civilians during her military operations, and those skills proved valuable in domestic situations as well. Morrison hit the floor hard, knocking the wind out of his lungs and leaving him gasping for breath. The gun skittered across the linoleum floor, coming to rest near the magazine rack. Sarah immediately moved to secure the weapon, keeping herself between Morrison and his associates. Rick and Danny stood frozen, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Their leader, who had seemed so confident and in control just moments before, was now lying on the floor struggling to breathe, while a woman who looked like she could be their teacher held his gun with obvious familiarity. "Nobody move," Sarah commanded, her voice now carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Rick, Danny, sit down on the floor with your hands where I can see them." The two men looked at each other uncertainly. They had expected to be in and out of the store in 5 minutes with easy money. Instead, they found themselves facing someone who clearly knew how to handle dangerous situations. "How do you know our names?" Rick asked, his voice shaking. "I make it my business to know things," Sarah replied without elaborating. "Now sit down before this gets worse for everyone." Morrison was starting to recover his breath, but Sarah kept the gun trained on him while watching his associates. She had handled situations with multiple hostiles before, and she knew the key was controlling the most dangerous person while keeping the others intimidated. "Lady, you don't understand what you're getting into," Morrison wheezed from the floor. "We're not some kids playing pranks. You just made a big mistake." Sarah's expression didn't change. "The only mistake made here tonight was yours. You picked the wrong store and definitely the wrong customer." Danny finally found his voice. "Jake, maybe we should listen to her. Something's really weird about this whole thing." Morrison struggled to sit up, his pride wounded more than his body. "She got lucky, that's all. One woman can't handle all 3 of us." What Morrison didn't realize was that Sarah was hoping he would try something foolish. Her training had prepared her for multiple attackers, and 3 amateur criminals would hardly challenge her abilities. In fact, she was somewhat disappointed that the situation hadn't required more of her skills. Police sirens could be heard in the distance, growing louder as they approached the store. Sarah had called 911 earlier, and backup was finally arriving. However, she knew she needed to maintain control of the situation until law enforcement could properly secure the scene. "Sounds like your time is up," Sarah told Morrison. "When the police get here, you can explain why you thought robbing a store was a good idea." Morrison's face showed a mixture of anger and confusion. Nothing about this robbery had gone according to plan. and he still couldn't understand how one woman had completely turned the tables on his operation. The sirens were getting closer, and Rick was becoming increasingly nervous. "Jake, we need to get out of here right now. Forget about the money. Forget about proving anything. Let's just run." But Morrison wasn't ready to accept defeat. His criminal reputation was on the line, and he couldn't bear the thought of being humiliated by someone he saw as just an ordinary citizen. He decided to make one last desperate attempt to regain control. What happened next would become the subject of police reports, local news stories, and coffee shop conversations for years to come. Morrison lunged forward from his position on the floor, attempting to tackle Sarah around the legs and bring her down. He figured that if he could get her off balance, Rick and Danny could help him overpower her and reclaim control of the situation. Sarah saw the attack coming from the moment Morrison shifted his weight. She sidestepped his clumsy rush with minimal effort, using his own momentum against him. As he stumbled past her, she delivered a precise strike to a pressure point on his neck that immediately dropped him back to the floor, this time completely unconscious. Rick and Danny watched in stunned silence as their leader crumpled like a sack of potatoes. The casual efficiency with which Sarah had handled Morrison's attack made it clear that her earlier success hadn't been luck or accident. This woman possessed skills that neither of them had ever encountered before. "How did you do that?" Danny whispered, his voice filled with awe and fear. Sarah checked Morrison's pulse to ensure he was still breathing, then looked up at the two remaining criminals. "Years of practice," she said simply. "Now, are you two going to make this easy, or do you want to try your luck as well?" The police sirens had grown much louder, and flashing lights could be seen through the store's front windows. Rick and Danny exchanged glances, both realizing that resistance was pointless. Whatever was happening here was far beyond their understanding or ability to control. Officer Mike Henderson was the first to enter the store, his weapon drawn and ready for a dangerous situation. He had responded to the robbery call expecting to find hostages and armed criminals. Instead, he discovered two men sitting quietly on the floor with their hands raised, while a woman stood calmly nearby holding a pistol by its barrel, clearly planning to turn it over to law enforcement. "Ma'am, I need you to set that weapon down slowly," Henderson called out, not yet understanding the situation. Sarah complied immediately, placing the gun on the counter and stepping back with her hands visible. "Officer, my name is Sarah Martinez. I'm a Navy SEAL, and I've just neutralized an armed robbery in progress." Henderson had heard of Sarah Martinez. The entire police department knew about the local woman who had joined the SEALs, and her achievements had made headlines in regional newspapers. Suddenly, everything made sense to him. "Martinez, the one who got the Medal of Honor last year?" Henderson asked, lowering his weapon slightly. "That's correct, sir," Sarah replied formally. "The unconscious subject is Jake Morrison, the robbery's ringleader. He was armed with the pistol now on the counter. The other two subjects are Rick Thornton and Danny Walsh. They participated in the robbery but were not armed as far as I could determine." More police officers arrived and began securing the scene. Tommy emerged from the back office where Sarah had told him to hide, and he immediately ran to Officer Henderson to give his statement about what had happened. "She saved my life," Tommy said, pointing to Sarah. "That guy was going to shoot me, and then he said he was going to kidnap me. She just walked over and took his gun away like it was nothing." Emergency medical technicians arrived to check on Morrison, who was still unconscious but breathing normally. The medics were puzzled by his condition until Sarah explained the pressure point technique she had used. They assured everyone that Morrison would wake up with nothing worse than a headache and some bruised pride. As Morrison was loaded into an ambulance under police guard, Rick and Danny were processed for arrest. Both men cooperated fully with police, still somewhat shell-shocked by their encounter with Sarah. They provided detailed statements about the robbery plan and Morrison's role as the leader. "I've never seen anything like what she did," Rick told Officer Henderson during his interview. Morrison's been in prison and he thinks he's tough, but she handled him like he was a little kid. We never had a chance." Danny's statement was similar. "She wasn't even trying hard," he said. "It was like she was playing with us. When Morrison tried to attack her the second time, I thought she might get hurt, but she just moved out of the way and touched his neck and he went down. I don't even know how that's possible." Word of the incident spread quickly through Millfield. By the next morning, everyone in town was talking about how Sarah Martinez had single-handedly stopped an armed robbery and protected Tommy Williams. The story grew more dramatic with each telling, but the basic facts remained impressive enough without embellishment. Local news stations picked up the story, and soon reporters were asking Sarah for interviews. She declined most requests, preferring to let the police handle public statements about the incident. However, she did agree to speak with Tommy's parents, who wanted to thank her personally for protecting their son. "I just did what anyone would have done," Sarah told them during their private meeting. "Tommy's a good kid, and he didn't deserve to be put in that situation." Mrs. Williams disagreed. "Not anyone could have done what you did," she said. "You have special training and skills that saved my son's life. We'll never forget what you did for our family." The criminal justice system moved quickly in Morrison's case. Faced with multiple witnesses and video evidence from the store's security cameras, he accepted a plea bargain that would send him back to prison for 15 years. His previous conviction made him a repeat offender, and judges in the region had little patience for career criminals who threatened innocent people. Rick and Danny received lighter sentences in exchange for their cooperation and testimony against Morrison. Both men expressed genuine remorse for their actions and seemed relieved that no one had been seriously hurt during the robbery attempt. The incident had lasting effects beyond the courtroom. Tommy Williams decided to join the Navy after graduating high school, inspired by Sarah's example of service and courage. The convenience store owner installed better security systems and hired additional staff for evening shifts. Officer Henderson used the incident as a teaching example during police training sessions, emphasizing how proper training and quick thinking could prevent dangerous situations from escalating. He often spoke about Sarah's calm professionalism and how her military experience had prepared her to handle civilian emergencies. Sarah returned to her duties with the Navy SEALs, but the story of her actions in Millfield became part of her unit's unofficial legend. Her teammates weren't surprised by what she had done. They knew her capabilities, but they were proud that she had used her skills to protect innocent people in her hometown. Years later, when Sarah eventually retired from military service, the town of Millfield offered her a position as police chief. She accepted the job, saying she wanted to continue serving her community in a new capacity. Her first official act was to establish a citizen self-defense program, teaching local residents basic safety skills and situational awareness. The convenience store where everything happened still displays a small plaque near the counter, commemorating the night when a Navy SEAL proved that heroes can appear in the most unexpected places. Tommy, now a Navy petty officer himself, visits the plaque whenever he's home on leave, remembering the woman who changed his life and inspired his own career in service. Morrison, serving his sentence in state prison, occasionally tells other inmates about the night he tried to rob a store and encountered a real-life action hero. Most don't believe his story, thinking it sounds too much like a Hollywood movie. Morrison knows better. He learned the hard way that you never know who you might meet when you decide to commit a crime, and sometimes the ordinary-looking person in the frozen food aisle might be someone extraordinary.